Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Hsieh. Hsieh is a serial entrepreneur and currently serves as the CEO of Concreit, building a simple way of saving and investing in commercial real estate for everyone. Previously, he was the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Flowroute, an award-winning business communications provider focusing on API-driven SMS, SIP trunking, and telecommunication resources. Flowroute delivers cost savings, flexibility, and higher quality connections to thousands of businesses around the world. Hsieh thrives off of his lifelong passion for entrepreneurship, technology, culture, design, and hip-hop. His talents have served Fortune 100 companies, including Apple, Linksys, Cisco, and Motorola, pushing forward new marketing ventures and fostering rapid growth. Hsieh holds a degree in information and computer science from the University of California, Irvine. He developed his expertise in technology, marketing, and design growing up in Davis, California. Welcome, Hsieh.
Thanks for having me, Shauna. Really excited to be here.
I'm excited too. Okay, we're starting with some rapid fire. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, Tupac or Biggie?
Oh, Biggie.
Me too.
Which is weird because I'm West Coast, but
I know.
It's his cadence. I don't know. I just resonate with it better.
Yeah, I do too. Although I do love Tupac. Okay, CEO you most admire. That's a tough one, I know.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. I feel like I bounce around a lot. For a while, it was Steve Jobs. I think recently Elon Musk, just for his boldness in terms of his actions, perspective, and decisiveness. And I don't know. I admire and I study CEOs, and I feel like there's something to learn from everyone.
Okay, so what is a favorite thing that you like to photograph?
I have to say my dog.
That's so funny.
I have a Shiba Inu. So
wait, what kind of dog is it? I'm writing it down.
It's a black and tan Shiba Inu. She's sort of on the smaller size. When it comes to photography, I'll run around and take photos of friends, family, my girlfriend, everything. But then it just seems like my dog ends up filling up the majority of my hard drive.
Okay, what's I guess the best foodie city?
Oh, best foodie city. My best experiences have been in New York. I'm spent a lot of time in LA, so I think there's a lot of great restaurants, but something about New York, the density, the ability to go from one block to another and find phenomenal food is really fun.
I totally agree.
I feel like Seattle is really starting to pick up the foodie game. I feel like the competition is really starting to come in, which is nice. Like coming from California, nice. It's nice to see.
Yes. Okay. So if you could meet anyone, who would you choose?
Today, if I could meet anyone, I'd love to meet Steve Jobs at a point in time. I've heard a lot of really different stories about him, but I think he's also been very inspirational to a lot of people that are working in sort of like the product space. And it would just be nice to kind of see how he is.
Yeah. I agree. 3 words that you would use or that others would use to describe your leadership style.
Quick, decisive, and empathetic.
I love it. I think we might have similar styles. Quick and decisive are somewhat overlapped, I guess. Empathetic.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that you're, just in the little that I know you, I'm guessing you're also like a motivator. You've got good energy.
I hope I am. I think there's times, I used to dance and direct hip hop teams, and for anyone that's danced, I think everyone knows like how brutal those rehearsals can be. And so I think there's part of me too that I feel like at times I'm like a tiger dad, and then I try to flip over to being like the cheerleader as well.
Yeah. It's a delicate, no pun intended, but it is a delicate dance. So tell
Yeah.
me, so, okay, in the intro, we were talking about Davis, California. That's where you're from. How
Yeah.
did your family end up there? And what was your childhood like being raised there?
Well, I think for my parents, they didn't really have that much of a choice. The majority of my family had already started immigrating from Taiwan into the United States. And I don't know why they chose Davis, California, but they did. And then my parents, I think, were one of the last ones to kind of make it over. And then we ended up buying the house of my uncle and aunt, and then we just lived there. And so while growing up, I didn't know people moved. It was like a weird thing. I was in the same house like from the moment I was born to when I left for college.
And
Um,
are your parents still there?
yeah, my mom is still in Davis, California right now, and they actually float around a little bit more. So
Yeah.
my parents, my family do now.
And
Yeah.
how has their story as I guess your first generation, right? So how has that shaped you, or kind of the way that you see the world and America and like the opportunities here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up in Davis, it's a really small city to begin with. And then my family, the sort of household I grew up with, my grandmother lived with us, and she had already raised, all of my uncles and aunts, and then also some of my cousins. So I had a grandmother who was like hardcore Taiwanese culture. My parents, I worked in a restaurant family, so I'd been working since like an early age. So I feel like there's a lot of things about my childhood that were just like I'm Taiwanese Chinese at home, and then when I'm in school, like I had the other identity, which I think explains a lot of even how I was in college. So it was really interesting to kind of have the what felt like a clash when I was a kid, in terms of the cultures. But now I feel like, wow, it's really an amazing opportunity to be able to see things from multiple lenses.
Yeah. And how would you describe the Taiwanese culture? Because I'm obsessed with learning about different cultures, and I feel like you can read
Hmm.
about it, but I also think just learning like what the home life is like, the food, the values, the way that Taiwanese people see themselves relative to their experience in our country, I think is just helpful. And especially in these days where there's, Asian hate and Black hate and Jewish hate and all sorts of just craziness in our country, especially, I think that it's helpful to learn people's stories.
Yeah, I think growing up in Davis, being part of the Chinese community, it was a really small community, and so there was a lot of focus around like being able to support each other. This sort of like undertone of we're not, everyone's trying to figure it out, right? And I think what I saw from my parents was their generosity and their desire to always be there for other people in our community. And that's something that I picked up from them. And I don't know if that was so much cultural, but I do feel like when I visit Taiwan again, it's like I see it, it's like everyone's here for each other. And it's really sort of heartwarming and inspiring. And I see that in other communities out here in America too. And so that's something that I learned. We are very direct. So I think that might just be my family. We don't mind just kind of like being raw and saying, what it is. But it's also interesting because then there's this point culturally too, where we're always trying to maintain like the peace in the room. And so you don't say things. And so passive aggressiveness kind of comes up. So I had a really interesting mix as a child.
Yeah. And what were you into back then? I mean, when did you start dancing and like getting into, I guess, computer science? How old were you when those things started to appear?
So I don't feel like I feel like I had a really interesting childhood because I was playing sports, but then I was always really bored in Davis too. So my parents worked a lot, and so that meant that I'd have to go find hobbies to sort of like take up my own time. I got into computers at an early age. My uncle and I think my cousin had brought over a computer at a point in time, and that's how I started. It was sort of like, I can play some games, like really old school games on a computer. And then from there, I figured out how to install more games. And then
Oh
I
my
got curious
gosh.
about like, what does this installation script do? And so I started dissecting that.
That's amazing.
And so it's just like what, it's when you give someone something and you start trying to reverse engineer the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I
I
think
will
that's
say
what
that's
got me
not
excited
everybody
about
though.
computers.
It's just not everybody. Like I think that I've had lots of people on the podcast who are in technology who describe themselves like that. And I'm like, I wasn't like that. My kids aren't like that. My husband wasn't like that. Like, I think it's like, that's just a DNA thing. Like, I don't know if it's a curiosity or if it's some people have described it as like rebelliousness. Like I want to take things apart, or just resourcefulness. Like, I don't know what skill that is, but it's amazing to hear.
I think it was sheer boredom for me as a kid, to be honest.
let me just have direct. So let me net it. I was bored. So what about dancing? I mean, that's killer. I love it. And I want to see you dance.
Yeah, so I started dancing in high school, like in jazz choir. So it was sort
Oh,
of like the
wow.
Glee Club in my high school. And I think as I was going through high school, I started experimenting with other forms of dance. I got asked by a few friends to, like they didn't have enough guys in their ballet. So then I tried that. And of course I was like, okay, this is weird, right? I'm trying to play tennis on, varsity tennis and at the same time do this. Like, I don't know if this is cool, but I'm like, it's fine. Let me just like try it out. I was trying to be supportive friends. In college, that's where things got really interesting. I first got exposed to like hip hop dance crews in college. And the first performance I saw, I was like, I got to do that. That is awesome. Like, I was just so excited. The feeling that I had was like, I was so inspired. I was like, I want more of this. And so that's what drew me in. And then, before I knew it, I was practicing, trying to figure out how do I do hip hop dance. I did a little bit of breaking in junior high and high school, but I was, terrible, weird, awkward, lanky guy. And so for me, getting into hip hop dance was a great journey.
Yeah. And how did you decide on Irvine, not UC Davis?
Oh yeah. So my parents would prefer if I stayed in Davis. Like that was the
Of
conversation.
course. As I'm sure your grandma too. Like, I love that. Multi-generational homes, that's the best.
Yeah. So I grew up in the same house, and I realized it's like this is probably my one opportunity to get
Yeah.
out and to experience the world. So that really motivated me. And I think when I was looking into UCI and their computer science program, I was like, this is actually a pretty good program. And I went to go visit, and it felt right. I went to go visit a few colleges and campuses, and Davis was awesome as an opportunity, as an option. But I just felt like it was the right move for me at the time.
And you decided to study computer science because you knew, I mean, I guess you are super young, but I'm like, that is just the most incredibly smart major. How did you have that insight to know to pursue that? Or was it just a passion thing? Were you thinking like big picture, like, what do I want to be?
I went through a few chapters, I think, in high school. So I was building websites for companies, and that's kind of what got me started in really deeply getting to web programming at that time. And this was back when it was still like HTML2, moving on to HTML3. So it was like table heaven for all the HTML files. It was just, there was not a lot on the internet at the time. I was curious. I was always curious about computer science. I think I got really like my some of my teachers in high school really suggested that I take it seriously. I think at that age, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted. But there was enough of these like conversations swimming in the back of my head. And then also the fact that I felt like I could be passionate about this. So I was like, let's give it a shot. And I think a lot of people go to college today in their first year going, this is really my exploratory year. I'm just trying to figure myself out. And so I still gave myself that opportunity. I think, getting into dance, like for a while, I thought maybe I should transition into the arts. Like maybe that's where, it made a lot more sense. But I just always found myself like, with computer science going, this just makes sense to me. And
Yeah.
so I just thought, well, it feels like it's the right thing. So I'm going to keep pursuing it.
Yeah. And what advice would you give your younger self? Like, do you feel like you made the right choice, the right school, the right size? I'm asking as a mom who's got a kid that might be thinking about applying to college soon. And then also, like, how did you support yourself?
Sure. Well, I think the piece of advice that I'd probably give myself is to trust my gut more, and then to be transparent and open with those around me about it. I think growing up in sort of an Asian American home, there's just a lot of, I don't know if you've had other founders kind of tell you like the archetypes. It's like be a
Oh, of
doctor, an
course.
engineer, a
I was about
lawyer,
to say,
and like
and it's like, hello, you're talking to a Jewish person. It's like, we're the same.
yeah, that's it. I mean, you're growing up and you're like, here you go, here are your lanes. You're gonna work yourself into it. Let's get you into all the after school courses. So I was always thinking about that, and I think computer science was sort of like, my parents were like, this is acceptable. You're an engineer, this is acceptable. So they weren't like ecstatic at the time, but I just felt like this is something that I still want to pursue.
Yeah.
So I think trusting my gut, that's something I'm still learning.
I love that. That's great
right
advice. Everybody could use that for all ages. And how did you end up supporting yourself?
Well, I was working through college, so my parents really supported me in terms of tuition, and then in terms of like living expenses, and towards the end of college, I was working throughout my 4 years in college.
In the restaurant field, or like in like engineering?
No, in engineering. So I was building websites for companies for a while, and then I actually ran a small venture at the tail end of high school. I was buying, computers and equipment from companies that were going out of business, and I was reselling them on eBay.
Oh my gosh, you're the ultimate entrepreneur.
That was like the thing that allowed me to have my own spending money. And I learned a lot during that experience in terms of building a brand. I was also doing quite a bit of what's considered affiliate marketing today, or sort of channel-based, and speaking with a lot of other CEOs and sort of like tapping into their networks in terms of going, oh, do they want this too? So it's a very niche space in terms of what I was selling. And I just kind of built a reputation at the time. And so I became a distributor for Sony Japan for like these ultra small laptops that were like, I would come in, I would actually customize and redo some of the software before I sent it out to my clients.
That's incredible. And how big did you build that business? I mean, was it like a legit thing that, did you ultimately, I guess, did you just leave, or did you exit in some sort of like, you sold it? What happened to the business?
I didn't sell it. I wish I'd gotten to that point where I was that sophisticated to understand it.
You were like a child.
Yeah, I was just figuring stuff out. I think I was motivated around like, oh, I want to go get, some food on the weekends. So I need to have spending money, and I want to buy that toy or that thing. And so it was never, I didn't have a long-term perspective on it at the time. But I do think, I take a look and I'm like, people legitimately have real companies that do this today.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's a whole ecosystem, and now it's being promoted as like Amazon FBA, and, but back then you didn't have any of these resources or tools.
Oh yeah. And so tell me about your entrepreneurial journey. I mean, it sounded like it started young, but what do you think, shaped you to have kind of the confidence, to start Concreit? And what year did you start it?
We started Concreit at the really tail end, beginning of 2019. We closed our first pre-seed round in 2019. I think if I want to go back to the history, like as a kid, I was always trying to figure out ways to like buy and sell things in the marketplace. Went to college, and I think there's sort of a lot of exploration, studying computer science and developing technical expertise at the time. I came out and I worked for an advertising agency down in Orange County. And that's where I got exposed to working for larger clients. And I helped launch 2 internet TV startups during that time. So coming in as an art director, I was just really doing graphical work, but then they discovered that I could also engineer. And so I got looped in, and then quickly I was running an engineering team for both of these companies to sort of think through the architecture and to build it out. So it felt like I was the entrepreneur behind the scenes. It was like kind of hire an entrepreneur, and our agency was really small, so there's only a few of us anyways. So I already was getting very comfortable with this, like, we don't have time doesn't exist, so we need to figure out how to make this all work. And I think I got to a point there where I had a few friends in college where we were working for another telecom startup while I was still in school. And they were like, hey, we're thinking of, like, we've been working on this prototype. We're sort of like, Sean, could you take a look in terms of what you think? And we're trying to figure out how do we get customers. And I think at that point I had developed a lot of confidence around, okay, this is how I can get customers in the door to scale something, sort of launching, a few platforms, and then having one go viral at the time. I was like,
Which one
I
was that?
think I could probably help you guys.
Yeah.
It was Cold Cast down in Orange County. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if everyone remembers, but there was it was sort of like the early days of trying to go and find and get like proprietary content. And so they worked on getting proprietary content. I was very deeply involved in engineering the streaming platform, and also the user interface, like thinking through how people could interact. And this is before like Netflix was still doing DVDs back then.
Yeah,
So it's a very different world. Yeah, very different world back then.
And what was your, I guess, journey to get to Flowroute and Buy-in? I remember him. I used to work with you guys.
Yeah.
I know you're the co-founder. How many co-founders were there? Is it just the two of you?
So three of us in total. So it was, Buy-in, me and Jordan. And so Jordan and I are working on Concreit today. I actually met Buy-in in the first day of school at UCI. So I thought he was our TA in my first computer science class. He was like fully buttoned up, had like
did he have like a mustache?
Just kidding. I just the way he dressed and came to class was like, there's no way he's a student, because I'm coming in with basketball shorts and flip flops. So it was funny kind of speaking with him, and then he's like, I don't know. Like, I was like, so what's the curriculum? Like, what are we doing for this quarter? He's like, I don't know. I'm a student. So that was the first funny conversation we had, but then we developed a friendship there in college. So those were actually the two friends I was telling you about that, they were working on a prototype of a calling platform, and they had asked for just my thoughts and help around potentially doing a website. I had gotten to the point where I was like, I feel like if there's any time in our life, it's time to do it. Like, we should try now. So I left the agency and pursued building Flowroute with Jordan Buy-in. And we got really lucky that first year. Like, we were profitable year one. It was sort of a bootstrapped approach. We worked with one of the most notorious hackers on the internet. He was giving a presentation. We had built and created this like guerrilla marketing campaign. So we created this fictitious hacker. We gave him a presentation. He went to Hope, which was a conference for hackers, presented it, and then it got picked up by CNET, like Gizmodo, and then there's always this Flowroute logo in the top left in the video. And so that was sort of the I think from my perspective, I wanted people to have a genuine curiosity before they landed on our website. And we were able to do that. And so we got our first set of customers that way. And we just started getting really honed in on what does that customer really want. We kept building there.
Yeah. And what was the result? Like, I think I lost touch with Buy-in. I don't know where Flowroute is today. Are you guys sold?
Well, we sold Flowroute to West in 2018. 2018. Yeah. And it is now still operating in downtown Seattle.
That's what I thought. Under a different name.
Under Intrado.
Intrado. Okay.
Yeah, and I still, I've heard from a few people that have worked there since, and or work there still, and it's still kind of humming along. I don't think anyone's really back from COVID yet in the offices. Yeah.
And so you had this idea. You're like, I got another run in me. You probably got another few, I'm guessing, because you got that energy. But I guess, how did you come up with the idea for Concreit? I love the company, as you know.
Thank you.
Where did that idea come from? Did you sit around with Jordan and say, hey, let's come up with an idea? Or did you have the idea and then grab each other and say, let's go do this?
So we actually had a like dice. No, I'm kidding. I think at the time after we sold the company, I realized I was like, I'm not used to having to manage money. I think I was still, I was pretty young and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I was like, I feel ill-equipped to be thinking through this. And so I was like, I probably should start investing money after selling Flowroute and in places that I feel like are smart. And so I really experimented with a lot of different asset classes. My childhood, as I was investing, I was thinking about like my family a lot. And it brought me back to my childhood, and real estate has always been a topic. Like it's been my family's dream to be sort of like financially free. I think that was one of the big things.
Right.
Working in a restaurant, I feel like you're quite the opposite. It's like,
So
it's
you're at the beck and call
crazy.
of the market and the supply chain and the customers and the
Yeah. And
service and the employees. It's like, it's a
so
nightmare.
many variables.
Yeah,
It's
so
super hard,
many.
and you're always operating under fire. And my parents always wanted to create this like passive income stream, something they could rely on. I think for them, they really view that as their way to retire. My parents didn't really invest heavily in 401ks or anything at the time, and so it was sort of that like, um, what I call sort of immigrant mentality, like invest in things that you understand and like you kind of stay in that space. Um, and so I was curious and I was like, you know what, let me get into real estate and start taking a look at what's really out there. It was through my experience investing in a few private equity funds where I realized, this is actually a fantastic experience. I feel like I'm now developing a cash flow stream that's going to allow me to be more entrepreneurial, or for me to like be able to focus on what I want to do next. And it just made me feel like I had this aha moment, and I felt like the opportunity didn't exist for a lot of people out there. And I had this identity crisis for a moment where I was like, why is it that it took me all of this work to build this company, I have to sell it, to now have this opportunity, when I feel like the people that it could serve are really the people that don't have the opportunity today.
It's always that way. You're right. Right. It's like, why do the celebrities
don't need it? Yeah.
Yeah. Or, so you see the more money you make, the more opportunities that come your way to make more money. It's actually fascinating. I completely agree. So what is the business model?
Well, the business model today is right now we have a private real estate fund that's income focused. And so we actually derive revenue in a fairly similar fashion to a private equity fund. What makes us really unique is sort of the experience that we crafted around it, and sort of the mechanics and the security accounting engine that we built that'll give our investors a new experience around getting into the space. So we took a look at a lot of the barriers, like things like, being an accredited investor, liquidity, and we felt like there's a lot of things that sort of hold people back from getting into real estate. And so we were sort of on this mission to figure out how to break a lot of these barriers to then make it a lot more accessible, a lot more fun. And we were trying to simplify the whole process. So our first product right now is one that we feel like is a fantastic way to supercharge your savings by investing into real estate. And it's all fixed income, like in our portfolio right now. So a lot of this is like, you invest, we pay out, we've been paying out weekly dividends. We have opportunities for weekly liquidity. And so people really have this experience that works a lot more like a savings account, but you're getting yields that are far surpassing what you're seeing at the banks.
Like what?
We've been doing about 5.5% annualized.
Oh, wow.
And so our thesis on this initial fund that we've gotten people to invest into is really around like, how do we protect against inflation? How do we still get you yields that are performing well in the market, while balancing this out with liquidity? Because for our demographic, access to capital is something that is still a requirement in life. I feel like for a lot of people that are very well off, they can tuck it away for longer, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But
yes,
that's not really the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not really the case.
I have so many questions. And if you're able to answer, great. If not, that's okay too. Okay. I'm just curious the size of the fund.
We're about 3 million AUM, so it's growing right now. But we have about 3,500 active investors.
Oh, that's awesome. If you the minimum investment is what?
It's $1.
So how does that work? When you say it yields 5.5%. So if someone puts in $1, they're making 5 cents, but they over time.
Right. It can compound. I mean, the goal isn't to have people just invest $1.
No, of course,
and then, stay there.
But right? it's the barrier to entry that you're trying to.
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing right now is that it's getting harder and harder for people to save up enough money then go, I want to deploy, a few $1,000s at a time. Like saving up $500 is already really challenging for a lot of families. And so the thesis around bringing down the dollar access line was around making this more accessible on a day-to-day basis, right? If you remember, I want like randomly throughout the day, I want to practice a good financial behavior. Maybe I should invest right now. That ability to just quickly top off, I think, will then spur better financial behaviors long term. And so we want to make that accessible. And it's really challenging in the private equity space. If you take a look at these, different real estate investments and funds, I mean, the minimums are usually really high. And you have other sort of requirements along the way. And so we felt like this was something that would allow people to step into this asset class and start to experience it and find, whether or not they find value in it, they would still have the ability to continue and grow. And so that's really the hope. We've had our first cohort of customers come in with like an average of $100 for their initial investment. And then within the year, they've like 7x'd it, in terms of the balance.
So cool. I love it. This is the best business. I'm obsessed. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think we're just trying to figure out when we call them the digital class of investors, right? The people that want to use technology and they're focused on the experience. They're like, how does this investment serve me in my life day to day? For that demographic, we're thinking about what do we need to construct to make this more meaningful and more connected. And I think that's the one thing that's been challenging about real estate, even for me, is once I invest, it's kind of like set it, forget it. And sometimes I really forget that I'm in it because it's just gone or I'm not in that city or something like that. And we're trying to figure out a way to really pull people in a lot more to kind of bring that experience to the forefront.
So I have literally like 100 questions, but so it's a fund. So they're not investing in individual assets. It's like a pool of all of the things that you've invested in. So it's commercial real estate across which cities?
Across the nation right now, we do have a bit of concentration in the Pacific Northwest because we also have, different business relationships out here with different originators. And then we just like the market too.
Yeah, it's a great market.
Seattle was, again, the fastest growing city in America last year, with the stats coming out. Super cool to see. I mean, I think we could all feel it, which is weird because, we're all quarantining and trying to figure life out over here. But we felt like it was a relatively protected market in terms of market absorption.
Right. And everybody thinks it's like the top, but it's not slowing down. It's like technology's continuing to grow in this area, which will obviously continue to impact real estate. Yeah.
Which is, it's super exciting. Yeah.
It is exciting. Okay. So if somebody's listening and they want to get involved or want to invest money, they just download the app, invest the money, and then I guess how do withdrawals work? And then is this compared to like a crowdfunding situation, or is it just one-to-one, like their money is their money invested in this asset class?
So really their money is their money invested into this asset class. We built a fund because the picking and choosing, I feel like puts a lot of risk on the shoulders of the individual investor. And for the investors we're pulling in, we believe they want a simplified experience and to be more focused on their financial
Right. And it's kind of like if you were going to do that, then they would take the time to go do that if they had the money to do it. But they're depending on you to have a diversified portfolio and
professionally managed, right? But, by fund managers that are in the space every single day. We felt like that was sort of the thing that's going to help, really provide people with a bit more freedom. So I mean, you can download the app within minutes. You can get signed up. You can get invested into the fund. When your investment is brought into the fund, you can then partake in future weekly dividends when profits are being distributed. We've been very consistent about weekly dividends for the last year. And in terms of withdrawals, those are requests. We typically process them in about a week. But we tell a lot of our customers, investors today that you should think about this more as like a midterm investment. That it doesn't work quite as quick as what you'd see with a traditional bank, because your money is truly getting invested in a private equity fund, and then from there there's a bit of work on the back end. But our goal is to make this as seamless. And so we have the desire to keep pushing to get to the point where it really feels fluid and fully liquid.
Right. And how do you protect the money? And then also, is there a certain amount of time that it has to be locked up, or can you access it whenever you want it? We
don't have lockups. So unlike, traditional real estate funds, there might be like a minimum of like a year lockup or a few. We don't have lockups in our fund. The way that we protect money is really through disciplined underwriting. We today are not, we're not originating our own loans. And so we actually go and build relationships with other originators and we will re-verify and just ensure it fits inside of the loan box that we're looking for, and just to make sure that the returns are commensurate with the risk that we're taking on, and that it's really well protected. So one of our first goals is to protect investor principal, and then from there it's to generate consistent cash yields.
Yeah, we like that, right?
Yeah.
And so do you have to be a certain age to invest? Is there a minimum age? I don't know what the legalities are around that.
Yeah, that's really an SEC requirement. So it's just 18 years and up. So, I think that really does a great job of opening it up to a lot of people.
Yeah. I agree. So, so you started talking about that you've been funded. How much have you raised, and from who? And what stage are you at? The seed round stage?
This was the seed round stage. So we raised $6 million. Matrix Partners led that deal. Hyphen Capital participated. Unlock Venture Partners participated, and then also individually Ben Elowitz and also John Stein, founder of Betterment, did as well.
Very cool. And how many employees do you have right now, and what are your plans as far as scaling and recruiting?
We have 11 full-time right now. I think sort of the broader team, when you think about contractors and remote teams that we're bringing in, we're roughly about like 20, I would say, in terms of in Slack, you'll see all the names sort of like fly around in the conversations. Our hiring plans, we're looking to scale the team. So we're talking through about 4 to 6 new active roles right now. And that's actually a conversation that we're still figuring out with all the department heads.
Yeah. Well, it's so exciting. What a great opportunity for someone. Tell me about the market. Like the total addressable market seems endless, basically. Are there competitors in the space? And if so, where are you in your timing relative to their launch?
So you're absolutely right. The addressable market is one that's like really hard to calculate.
Does it begin and end? Yeah.
Yeah, like we've tried to think through like what's the private equity real estate market look like? What does just the real estate market look like in general? I think given the fact that, we introduced this fund, we have aspirations to ultimately make this look and feel a lot like the Acorns with Betterment of private real estate, where you can come in, simply create an account, pick and choose themes or the blend that you like in your portfolio, and then we'll go out and manage that. So I think with that said, it's hard for me to really quantify. It's big. It's just big. Like, I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars. We're not talking about like
totally.
a $5 billion market here. In terms of competitors, I think it's just a very competitive market in general in real estate. So it really depends on how you want to look at it. We get compared a lot to Fundrise, who is also, SEC qualified in terms of their offerings. They have been around the market for quite some time. And I usually tell people right now, what we focus on is technology to enable a different experience in private equity investing. So we're studying mutual funds. We think through like, how do we make this more fractional nature? Like we've learned a lot from just taking a look at even the DeFi blockchain space and thinking through like, what are they introducing over there? What can we bring over here and not have it be necessarily DeFi, but then the benefits, like how do we bring those into what we're doing today? So we feel like we're pretty differentiated in terms of being able to provide liquidity. We also just have a very different experience, like with our weekly dividends, and it just feels like there's more of a pulse. That's the feedback we've gotten from a lot of our customers and investors that do spend time investing on other platforms or even into like directly into real estate themselves.
Yeah. And how big are you trying to grow this thing? Like, what are your long-term plans and kind of what's the vision?
Well, I think I've sort of been talking with people recently, and I think in a lot of ways, I'd like to build this up to be competitive with like BlackRock in the future. So I think BlackRock has done a phenomenal job pulling in institutional investors, pulling in sort of the high net worth. And the experience is very different. It's like, it's truly PE, like, okay, here we go. Here are the docs. We're going to walk through. There's lawyers involved, et cetera. But I do believe that people are looking for convenience in terms of getting into investments. I think we saw a huge shift in the markets given Robinhood, like during COVID. I think we're starting to see a lot more money flood into a lot of the robo-advisors in terms of applications like Wealthfront, M1, Betterment. And I think people will choose the experience that makes sense for them. And I think that we have a really good shot at being a household name when it comes to real estate investing.
I think so too.
We're growing this company in Seattle. It's the backyard of Zillow and Redfin.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible business model. I think you're definitely the leader to take it to that level. And I'm personally going to definitely invest, and hopefully this podcast reaches people and they do the same thing. That would be my goal. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell me how you're balancing it all, and what do you do when you're not taking pictures of the Shiba Inu and maybe dancing and your girlfriend? Like, how do you spend your time, and just kind of, what do you do, I guess, to set yourself up for balance?
I've been working out a lot, just because, during the days in the office, it's really high pace. And I feel like I kind of carry that energy when I go to the gym. I have a trainer as well. And it just gives me the ability to sort of like counter the day with physical activity. Meditation's a thing that I practice. I also have this device called Brain Tap. If you haven't seen it, it's super cool. It sort of like induces almost like a transcendental meditative state, and it takes you through a few different programs. It's really fun. So if you're into like, I forget the category right now, but it's sort of like we're calm and like some of these other devices out there. But yeah, the mindfulness piece I think is so critical to sort of balance out. And then I'm a foodie, so I like to eat. I was like a fat kid growing up, and so I was like, just, I grew up in a restaurant, so there's food was always around.
Yeah.
And so I love running around and trying new restaurants.
Yeah, well, send me some of your suggestions. I like to eat too, and I agree that Seattle's becoming more of a foodie city, and I also love to work out. So you're doing all sorts of stuff to keep balanced. I love it. And what's your ultimate fuel? What fuels you?
Yeah, so I think part of the story that I explained earlier, like after I sold Flowroute, I kind of went off on a journey to really understand myself a little bit deeper. I started thinking about like what my purpose is. It feels like, life flies by so fast and we only have so much time here. And I really wanted to do something meaningful in this world that I felt like was going to be positive, that could help people. And I was like, I'm not that great at running nonprofits. I've never done it before. I'm like, what am I good at? And I'm like, I'm a tech guy. And so I know how to do this, build products and build a company. And I'm really passionate about real estate right now. And so all of this started kind of coming together. And so I think what fuels me right now is just thinking through that, I want to be here to really help build a better world where there's financial opportunity and fairness to it. And so, there's a lot of things that are really challenging about our current sort of like macro, like the sort of macro topics that we're seeing right now. And it just feels like there's so much more work to do, and I get up and I got to go.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You. Small disclaimer for this podcast. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and may change at any time based on the market or other conditions and may not come to pass. Listeners to this podcast should be aware of the real risks in investing, including the risk of loss of your investment. There is liquidity risk, and there is no guarantee that you will be able to exit your investment upon immediate request through the redemption program. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Investments or strategies discussed on this podcast do not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs. This material is not to be construed as or relied upon as investment advice or recommendations does not constitute a solicitation to buy or sell securities and should not be considered legal investment or tax advice.